I'm Chris Stafford, and this is Art the Podcast, where we meet the women behind their art.
If you don't feel it, I'll make you feel it. I'll show you what I mean. If you don't feel it, I'll make you feel it. I'll bring you to your knees. If you follow me.
My guest this week is Cuban-born photo-based artist Maria Martinez-Canas. Maria first came to the US at the tender age of 3 months with her parents, and 4 years later, in 1964, they relocated to Puerto Rico. Maria recalls her earliest fascination for photography as an 8-year-old, when she started working with a Polaroid Swinger camera that her parents gave her. Her mother also gave her an old twin-Lex Rolleiflex, which she bought out of Cuba and which Maria still has today. It wasn't long before she asked her parents for a darkroom in the house, and thus began her passion for the process of creating images and processing film. Maria has been called a precocious photographer with an insatiable appetite to explore the art of photography, and it wasn't long before her talent became apparent when she had her first exhibition in 1977 at the age of 17. Between 1978 and 1982, she attended the Philadelphia College of Art, where she studied with the likes of Joan Redmond, Ron Walker, Ellen Berger, and Arno Raphael Minkinen. In 1985, Maria received a Fulbright Hays grant, which enabled her to travel to Spain to study, and where she culled archival sources, such as historical maps and documents, which inspired her to create negatives based on Cuban maps. She returned to the United States in 1986, where she settled in Miami. Two important series from the 1990s, Totems and Quinceañeras Cubano, 15 Cuban stamps, epitomize her interest in a photomontage aesthetic and use of imagery drawn from her Caribbean childhood. Maria is the recipient of numerous awards and grants, including a Polak Krasner Foundation Photography Fellowship in 2016, a National Endowment for the Arts grant in 1988, and a Civitello Ranieri Foundation Fellowship in 2004 in Italy. Her photographs are in many private and public collections, including the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, American Art Museum, Smithsonian Institution, the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and the Museum of Modern Art and International Center of Photography in New York. She is currently working on a project that involves the work of early 20th century German photographer August Sander. When she's not in her studio, Maria enjoys deep-sea diving, for which she is a certified diver, and watching her favorite basketball team, the Miami Heat. She says, "I think that visually, when you look at a work of art, be it sculptures, be it painting, be it photography, whatever it is, you, as a person, you're bringing yourself, who you are, what we call the baggage. You bring your iconography, you bring your identity, you bring your experiences as a person. With your eyes, you're looking at an artwork, but with your head and with your heart, two very different things, the brain and the heart, but when they are communicating with each other, it's a very interesting dialogue. You don't have to know about art. You just have to relate to it." Maria, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Now, I know we could talk about a lot of things because the conversations that we've had have gone from baseball to horses to basketball and to photography, of course, the one thing that you are passionate about. And, you know, you're so accomplished that I think of that line in the song Love Story, you know, where do I begin to tell the story? Because it's so complex in a way. You've had such an amazing career. I wonder if you look back at it right now at this moment in time and think, okay, what do I want to do next? Because you are a perpetual explorer of the art.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you chose that verse from that song. Because, you know, one day I was thinking about my life, I was going back, thinking about where I am today and how long this journey has been in many ways. And I'm thinking of relationships and love and all of that. And I thought, for many, many years, I thought, I haven't been able to have a very, very I have long relationship, but not one that has been for very, very long. And then one day it hit me that I have had a very long love in many ways, which has been my work. As an artist, is been, a journey and a journey that have had really big highs, really low lows. And then, primarily, I always say that I like to sometimes remain, in the middle, where I don't have necessarily limited highs or a lot of lows, that I can just continue doing my work, because it's what I have devoted my entire life to. It's what I have done, since I can remember. And you mentioned, we talk about photography. It's really is what I love. The history of the medium that even though I do not, I do not think of it I don't choose to work in a conventional, traditional way. That doesn't mean that I don't love the history of the medium. And it is the history primarily, the understanding of photography as a science first, and then as a fine art. That is really what has interested me, through this entire journey, that I have had, as an artist.
So you've been called an experimental photographer, a precocious photographer, and an insatiable one. I think you're all of those things, judging by the work that you've produced and the conversations that we've had, Maria, how you have an insatiable appetite to explore the medium and the possibilities and the processes within the medium of photography.
Yes, I do. But what makes me, because I always tell people that, what keeps me working is that number one, I'm very curious. I'm always been a very curious individual since I was a little kid. I always love learning. I love, and I don't mean only within the arts. I love learning about everything. I like knowledge. I like information. And what brought me and what I fell in love with first was the camera. The science of the medium of photography is what I thought that was really, interesting for me. It was the curiosity of a child that suddenly came upon a camera as a tool that looked different because I never seen anything like that before. I had a lens, it had a body, it had a viewfinder, and I never seen that before when I was a little kid. So I became very curious about this idea that you could actually document, the exterior world, with this tool. And, and what helped me also, I must say, is that because both my parents were art collectors, they love art, is that they allow me in many ways they feed my curiosity. They were interested in me being interested in the arts. And that was really important because it is, as a teacher, which I am also, I come upon students that sometimes their parents are not supportive of them working in the arts because maybe it's not going to be a job that will make them, will be able for them to pay their bills. And so sometimes when that support is not there, you look for something else because it's frustrating. It's frustrating. But imagine having the support in doing what you love to do. And it was wonderful. And I for that, I have to thank my parents because they were really great. They allowed their youngest daughter to do whatever craziness I wanted to do. they really, they were open to that. And it helped me to have that. I did not go to an art high school. I didn't even realize that I was going to study art until the time come that I had to apply to the university. I knew that I was going to come to the United States, but I did not know what I was going to study. So it just happened. I had an opportunity to ask one of my former teachers about her opinion on what she thought that I should study. And she said, you should study what you love the most. And then it kind of hit me that what I loved the most was the medium of photography, but I had no idea that you could actually study that. And then when my eyes were opened that I could have a career and I could study that, and then I felt like I flourished, that I really was doing what I loved to do.
Let's go back to where you were born and raised, Maria, in Havana, Cuba in 1960, and then your family moved to Puerto Rico in 1964. What do you remember of those very early days as a child growing up? What were the earliest memories?
Well, I was born in Cuba. My parents left Cuba when I was only 3 months old. They did not go to Puerto Rico. They came to the United States, to Miami. So it was in 1960. I was only 3 months old. I have no memory of Cuba at all. So, it is in 1964 when I'm 4 years old that they decided to move to Puerto Rico, and that's where I grew up. What I remember, and I remember when I think about those early years and my attraction to photographs is because my parents were 22 and 23-year-old kids when they left Cuba. They thought they were going to be back within a year. That never happened. They realized after the first year that they were not going back, that they had to look at that they have left a life in Cuba that was not going to come back, at least not as soon as they thought that it was going to. And when that happened at one time, as years went by, my dad had an opportunity to get a job in Puerto Rico. I think that there was an interest in going back to the Caribbean, speaking Spanish. But any Cuban of that era, especially my grandparents and, well, even though they're no longer alive, but that generation of older Cubans will tell you that whenever a Cuban leaves Cuba, the first call that they will do to friends is to tell them, hey, I was able to leave Cuba and I took your photograph of your wedding or the photograph of your family. And I realized that my parents will talk to us, to the three of us, about family members and about the island through photographs. They put a lot of emphasis to that object, to that ability of that object of a photograph to tell a story and to kind of introduce us and present to us things that we were not able to have them outside in exile, So, I have no doubt that their importance that they put to that object of a photograph is what also brought me to start looking at them in a different way, in a way of learning and having, of learning and understanding, because also I was born in Cuba. I left when I was 3 months old. I come to Miami. I am 4 when my parents moved to Puerto Rico. I went from when I lived in Puerto Rico from the age of 4 to the age of 18 when I came to this country to Philadelphia to do my bachelor's degree. It was I needed to come to understand why is it, because I'm Cuban born, Puerto Rican grown, American citizen. And I became an American citizen when I was 20. 2 years after I already living in this country. And why is it that I feel very Cuban, very Puerto Rican, and very American? And the three identities have had an impact in my life and in the way that I think, and the way that I relate to the world that I live in. So that have had an influence also in my own work, because I needed to come to terms with what makes me who I am, with that search for that personal identity and understanding why I feel like I can go to Puerto Rico. I can start talking to Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico and my accent completely shift. I come to Miami, I talk to Cubans and my accent completely shift. I do have an accent in my English language because I am Latina, and that I cannot, not that I want to get rid of because I don't want to, but, I have an accent. I'm not a native speaker. So all of those things have to have an influence on the way that I think is you can't get out of that, and that is something, because I also grew up in a very Cuban family, but I grew up in Puerto Rico surrounded by Puerto Rican families, by Puerto Rican friends. And then I came to the United States and I embraced coming to the States is really interesting because it makes you look to yourself as Latina and to understand. It's really interesting because, now my English is a language of business for me. Spanish is a language of my personal life. And it's very different. It's a very different, thing to deal with. But it's the three identities are very much who I am. And I embrace them and I love them, each one of them.
And I would imagine that's a combination of the cultures and of the historical relevance then to each of those countries and the ones that you've adopted particularly. And yes. It must mean a lot to you, I would imagine, in the context of your individuality and being then educated in an English-speaking country as well.
Mm-hmm.
But as they say, you can take the girl out of Cuba, but you can't take the Cuban out of the girl.
Oh, no, not at all. And you know what? There are people, maybe to some people, they have wanted to, once they move here, they want to completely immerse themselves in the American culture and all of that. And I have wanted to do that, but I don't want to negate where I come from, what makes me who I am. Because I realize that people love that. People in Philadelphia or in Chicago, where I did my master's degree, they love to learn about new cultures, to eat new food, to listen to music, to Latin music, to Caribbean music. It's really interesting that because sometimes we hear the negativity of the divisiveness, if I pronounce that correctly, of the world that we're living today. I have to tell you that growing up, I felt very welcome in many ways. I found the support system of the people that will embrace and will want to know more about where I come from and what makes me who I am.
And I know from what you've said and and the conversations we've had, that, the passion that you have, the emotion and the passion, it clearly comes, like many artists, it comes across in their work. So I'm trying to go back now, Maria, to those very early days to get a sense of what that little girl, Maria, was like in her curiosity and her appetite to learn when she discovered, when it was, that moment that your mother put a Rolleiflex in your hands and,
mm-hmm.
The novelty of that, and the curiosity that you had. And this was the beginning for you, as a photographer and as more than beyond. I hesitate to call it. I don't like to call you just a photographer. You're that much more than a photographer. Did you have a sense then that this was something that you were going to embrace as in your life as a career, when you were really quite young.
Yes. And I, once I come to the States to do my bachelor's degree in Philadelphia, that Maria began. That devoted to the art world, to questioning everything, because that is also one of the things. It is the amount of questions that I have as an artist and as a person that made me, through my work, try to see if I can find the answers to that question. That has always been, and maybe, like you said, yes, I work in the field and the medium of photography, but I call myself a photo-based artist more than anything, because it's beyond just the medium. It's a much more vast thing. I consider myself to be very conceptual, but it's documenting. When you take a photograph with the camera, you are photographing. Let's say if I go out to shoot, and I love photographing landscape, I love photographing buildings, and I love documenting. When I go to new places that I never been before, I love to have my camera so I can document. But I was trained as a photographer to look with my eyes first and then react with my camera second. It is with my camera that I am documenting what my eyes are seeing. And that's very different. I don't walk the street with my camera in front of my eyes. I walk the street with my camera hanging on my neck, being held in my hand, and then I will be looking with my eyes. And if I see something, it is that I react with the camera. The camera is that tool that documents what is in front of me. But what is really interesting, at least for me, is that I live in a three-dimensional world. But with the camera, you take that 3D and you convert it into a 2D. And many times I tell this to my students when I teach the intro to photo in film. How many times we have taken a photograph and we think, oh my God, this is going to be a great photograph. And when we develop the roll of film and we look at it, it doesn't work. Because what we sometimes forget is that they have gone from 3-dimensional to 2-dimension. And that's completely different. But they talk to us. Photography has that ability to tell stories, and if you pay attention to them, if you look at them really fast, you don't get anything. But if you start observing them and paying attention and study the photograph, that photograph may tell you about relationships. They might tell you about families. They might tell you about the past. They might tell you about the present, and they might even tell you about the future. And that is where I'm very intrigued with the medium. That's what keeps me working with it. Because it has anyone that, especially if you do film, if you have ever developed a roll of film, you run the risk of getting hooked into the medium because it's magical. And it's still very magical, very different than digital photography. Looking on the display is not the same as developing and seeing an image come out in the darkroom. Very different. Very different.
Absolutely. My totally different world. And you were lucky. You asked your parents for a darkroom when you were a child. You knew that, that you had to explore the possibilities in a darkroom. And so I'm sure that you're glad that you grew up in the era of film and were able to develop, no pun intended, develop your interest in film. And now later in digitally, you are manipulating photo images. So you have the benefit of both worlds.
Yes. But the way that I document or I record, and I'm going to use that as recording a photograph, Okay. The way that I record or I create a photograph digitally, my camera, the first digital camera that I ever bought was on 2014. It took me 2 months to decide which camera to buy, because the number one thing that I needed that camera to have was a viewfinder, not a display, because display is on the back. It's a viewfinder. I need to have that little hole that I put my eye to, because I was trained, again, to look with my eyes and record with my camera. I use the same training no matter if I'm doing film or if I'm doing digital, to the point that when I am taking pictures with my digital camera, I don't look to see at the display to see if it works. I just shoot and shoot and shoot. And it's not until I go back and I then load it into the computer or the laptop that I look at them for the first time. And it's the same as if we never looked at images right away. We waited to have to develop them and then make a contact sheet. And that's when we would look at them for the first time. I like to discover that. I love to look. Now I am separated from where I was before. And now let's say I can rediscover or relive the walking. Like I can give a chronology or story even to when I was walking and I encounter things that I photograph. So it's not only just taking a picture. It's doing a lot of other things. It's looking at the world. And that's something that today's young generation that grew up with a smartphone, they record everything with the smartphone, but they sometimes don't look at the world. They're just documenting really quickly. And in film, you have to slow down. And that's the first thing that I tell my students. You have to forget about that instant gratification of digital, and you have to look at the world. Because you are missing a lot when you're looking down to your phone. You need to put that away and you need to look up. Look at the world, discover with your eyes, because you're going to be amazed by it. You don't want to go to Barcelona and be walking the street in Barcelona looking down at a smartphone because you're sending a text to Miami. What is that? You don't want that. You want to be walking down the street and in the smartphones, text, all of those are great. Email, fantastic. But the world is a lot better.
Because the process of taking a photograph, in the sense that, you and I would have been used to with film originally, and the whole process of the darkroom, it was the experience of it all, mm-hmm. Not just the process of actually what comes out of the tray, as a contact sheet, but the entire process of it all, which is taken away digitally now, and it's a whole different world, as we know. But your parents were very encouraging, though, Marie. At no point did you have any doubt that this could be a field for you, I'm sure. And you were determined to make a career by having the education, as you said, going to the US, coming to the US to be educated. But did you have a sense then, as a young teenager, which field you wanted to go in?
No, necessarily. I knew that I love chemistry. But in the United States, on your junior year, when you're going to start, you have just finished your junior year. You have that summer in between, and you have to start figure it out. Well, what am I going to do? Because applications for admission for your bachelor's degree have to be done in the fall. Okay. So I remember that I'm thinking, well, one of the things that happened in the summer of the end of my junior year and before I became a senior in high school, and that's the summer of 1977, is that I was doing photographs. I am walking with a friend of mine. He's a friend of mine from he used to go to an all boys high school. I went to an all girls high school. The two high school were brother and sister high school. And they didn't have a photo club in my high school, but they have one in his high school. And they allow me, because they were sisters high school, sister and brother and sister high school. They allow me to use the club, the photo club, the dark room and all of that. So we met over there. And then in the summer, we are walking in Puerto Rico, taking pictures, when we came upon a gallery. And this just happened to be a photo gallery in Puerto Rico. And we went in and we looked around and we saw this exhibition, and the space was, the gallery was in a very old residential home that they have converted into an art center. The family had converted into an art center, and that was called Galeria Aboy, in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And, we were looking around, and we went to the owner of the gallery, who was sitting there on a table, and we told the guy, we want to have a show here. And the guy looked at us like, who are these kids that are asking for an exhibition? He was so startled by that question that he got his calendar, look, and he say, I have an opening in November. Will you be interested? And we say, yes. So he said, well, but you have to pay for everything. You have to paint the walls, frame the work. Your parents have to do the opening reception. They have to put the drinks, all of that. And we say, okay. So when that happened, it made me, that's around that same time is when I decided I'm going to go to my Spanish literature teacher in high school, and I'm going to ask her what she thinks I should do. So I go to her and I say, Isabel, that was her name. What do you think I should study? And she didn't even think. She just blurted out, you should do what you love to do the most. And I remember thinking, but if I do that, and this was my answer to her, if I do that, I will have to study photography. And she said, why don't you do that? And I say, you can study photography? And she said, yes. So it never really, yes, I have parents that were art collectors, but it never occurred to me that I was going to become an artist. I loved art, but I thought everybody loved art. I had a camera, but I thought everybody had a camera, and it was thanks to, I always wonder today, years later, what would have been of me if I had asked not Isabel, my Spanish literature teacher, if I had asked another person and they have said to me, you have to study law or you have to study medicine. Would I have done that and not been happy with my life? I always wonder what would have happened, but I trusted this person that, made a big difference, in my life. And in many ways, I always say that I became a teacher because I want to give back what was given to me. I love teaching because of my teachers, because I want to give them, I want to make a difference in somebody's life, like they were to me. I was very fortunate, absolutely very fortunate that answer was exactly the perfect answer, for me. And then it makes sense because I love science. But I didn't know I love the darkroom work. That's why I like chemistry, because I love the measurements and the chemicals and the smells in the darkroom and the safe lights, the very dim lights in all of that. It's like you were talking. It's not just taking picture with the camera. It's an experience. It's walking the world, but it's also getting your hands dirty and putting an apron and smelling like fixer and developer and stop bath. And, it's a whole way of being. It's a whole way of life that I absolutely love it.
You're making me smile because I reflect on those times in the dark room and the smell of the fixer and all of that. It is addictive for sure.
Yeah.
Well, a big thank you to Isabel Durand, who you said was your Spanish literature teacher. And teachers often do influence of us, our careers, our pathways in life. But I'm wondering if there were any photographers that you were admiring as a young girl there, Maria, when you were exploring the art of it all. Were there any books, were there any exhibitions that you went to that inspired you?
Yes. And when I was 15 years old, so this is now 2 years before that exhibition and before Isabel Duran mentioned what I should do. I was already taking pictures, and I was going to celebrate my 15th birthday. And my parents asked me what it's a big deal in Latina family, like quinceañeras, we call that. In the United States, it's sweet 16. In the Latin world, is quinceañera. It's your 15th year. And my sister have had parties in the house, in a discotheque in Puerto Rico. And when my turn came, my parents asked me, what would you like? Thinking that I was going to say I want a party. But I say I would like a trip to Paris. And they were in shock and say, what? They say, well, a party lasts 4 hours, and I think a trip will last my entire life, and, the memories of it. So it was crazy. And they decided, they say yes to go to Paris. And my sister were super happy that I asked for that because they were coming. And, but, we can now go from Puerto Rico to Paris. We have to fly from Puerto Rico to New York, Paris. So when we arrived in New York, my parents took us to MoMA, to the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And, MoMA has a photography department and photography galleries. And immediately, when I find out that the museum have photo galleries, that was the first gallery that I go directly to see. And I remember that I came upon this photograph by an American photographer by the name of Harry Callahan. And Harry Callahan, who's very well known, is considered to be one of the masters of the medium today, together with Aaron Siskin, were the founders of the photography department at Rhode Island School of Design. And I did not know his work. It was the first time that I was looking at it. And it was this piece from 1943 that is called Leaves in the Snow. And I remember looking at it, and the photograph was it was only lines because it was snow, and the little leaves were coming out of the snow. And I remember looking at it, and I felt that I was not looking at a photograph, that in reality, I was looking at a piece of music, of a sheet of written music. Now, at this time, my parents, I took piano classes, so I was very, I was accustomed to look at music sheets, and it looked to me like I was looking at music notes. And I remember looking at this photograph and thinking, wow, I think that it's like it opened my eyes to a very different way of making a photograph. And it had an impact, years later. Now, when I am starting my junior year in my bachelor's degree, 5 years later, I realized, because technically I was 15 when I saw that image. I am 20 when I came. And when I remember that image again in my head, because I needed to do an assignment. And I remember that I thought, I'm going to try to see if I can work in this manner. And I was given an assignment that I hated, an assignment that is a still life assignment. And I thought, oh my God, how boring, that I have to do a still life assignment. But I thought, Maria, you need to do the assignment. There's no other way. You're given an assignment, you have to do it. You need to get an A on an assignment. Okay. So what you need to figure out is how you can take that assignment that you do not want to do, and you need to turn it and make it work for you. So I decided I'm going to work in the manner of Callahan, the way that I remember seeing that image, with a still life as an assignment, and see if I can do it. So that is the first time when I do that. It's the first time that I remember thinking my voice as an artist is finally coming out. That's when I decided, and I consider that body of work you can see it in my website. I consider that body of work the beginning of my career as an artist, because it's the voice, it's that unique style that will define my career. And it's really interesting. And it came from an assignment that I thought it was a terrible assignment. But again, I was also very fortunate that my teachers in Philadelphia also allow me to do whatever I wanted. They wanted for me to convince them, let's say, that the still life assignment, because they couldn't see it. They were like, where's the still life? And I say, behind those lines, behind the black. And they were like, okay. But I got an A, because it was exactly what it was. I convinced them that it was correct. And it made me realize, you can do this. You can do it. I don't know if I was ever going to make a career. That I had no guarantee that it was going to work for me. But I knew that finally I was discovering that voice that would really define my identity as an artist. And that was amazing.
So how were you making a livelihood then? How were you paying the bills in those early days as a young artist?
I decided that I became an adjunct. I was doing, when I go to Philadelphia, I'm doing my bachelor's degree there at Philadelphia College of Art. Today it's called the University of the Arts. From there, I went to do my master's degree in Chicago. And I went to Chicago because I saw the work of a woman photographer whose work, she came to Philadelphia to give a lecture on her work and work with us. And I absolutely was taken with her work, and that's Barbara Crane. And then 6 months later, I saw on a symposium that Susan Sontag was the main speaker of the symposium. There were two other speakers who they had individual presentations, and I absolutely love their presentation. One was Joyce Neymanas and the other one was Bob Lesher. And Joyce is a photographer. Bob Lesher was an art historian of Latin American art. And I fell in love with their presentation. And I found out that the three of them were faculty members in Chicago. So that's what brings me to Chicago. After that, I graduated with my master's degree. And again, I applied for a Fulbright grant. Because I applied, I had to get a job. I had a 9-to-5 job right after my master's degree. Was it a job that I love? No. But do I need it, as you say, to pay bills? Yes. And, and it was very kind of, we go after being in the master's degree and classes in a structure, and I did high school, bachelor's, master, and suddenly you find yourself on your own. You go through a state of that you feel very lost. So I applied for a grant, and to take me to Spain to do my work, doing a project. I created the project, and I arrived in Spain. And for the first time, I finally felt that I have come home.
And this was in 1986.
86. Yeah, I leave on December of 85, and I am under the Fulbright in 1986. And what I develop a project that will take me to different archives in Madrid, Seville, Valladolid, the different archives where the documents belonging to the discovery of Cuba and Puerto Rico by Christopher Columbus, where they are located. So I was photographing on the street a lot. I had an apartment in Madrid, but I was traveling by train to the different places where archives were, and I was able to get into and look and work with the maps. Under the Fulbright program, it's a very prestigious grant, so you are given access to this material, and it was absolutely extraordinary for me. And it made a lot of sense that I go there with the idea that I was going to work with Puerto Rico and Cuba, and ended up only working with the maps belonging to Cuba. And the idea of utilizing a map to find where I come from and what makes me who I am. And it kind of clicked. It made me realize this is exactly what you need to be working. So it is after the Fulbright that I come back to the United States and realize that I come to Miami. I thought I was coming for 3 months, figured out what I want to do, where I want to live, and I never left. And I've been here for 36 years now, something like that. It made a lot of sense that I came here. My family was here. At this time, my mother is already here. One of my sisters was here. My father came later. My aunts are here. My cousins were here. So it kind of made a lot of sense that I ended up in Miami. And also, I did jobs wherever. I started teaching at the University of Miami when I was 28 as an adjunct. It helped me paying bills. I would do whatever. I would photograph. Because I studied photographer, I had the knowledge of the medium. So if somebody needed, let's say, I work in a gallery. That was my first job in Miami. I work in an art gallery. When they find out that I was a photographer and I could photograph fine art, they would ask me, can you photograph this painting for an exhibition? And I would get paid for that. So I love to use the knowledge of my knowledge of the medium of photography to make money. I mean, I can do that. I know how to take pictures. I know how to print. I may not do it in the conventional way, but it doesn't mean that I don't know how to do it. So the knowledge, I have used it whenever necessary because I have the ability to do and work with the medium, and that I can make money from it. And I'm not telling you that I'm making a lot of money. I'm making some money that allows me to continue doing my work full time, work very basic. No, I was not driving the latest model, a expensive car. No, it was very simple, no frills, but I was doing my work, and that's what I wanted. And I was more than happy to sacrifice a lot of things if that would allow me to do my work.
Well, I'm just thinking that, when you talk about the work that you did in Spain with those archival maps, that your photography skills really lent themselves to forensic work as well as archival work.
I always wanted to do that, as a matter of fact. I love forensics photography, I have to tell you. Never taken a class, but I always wonder, they have a university here in Miami that you can take a forensic photography class. And I always love that because I love archives. Yeah. And again, here we have the importance that my parents gave to photographs. I love the object of a photograph. It's right now, in March, I had a curator of photography that I invited to come to Miami. The school where I teach invited her. I brought her as a visiting artist for her to work with my students. And her name is Alison Nordstrom, who lives in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And Alison was a senior curator at one time of the George Eastman House in Rochester, New York. We have known each other for more than 30 years. And because of my work, she was one of the first curators, American curators that, early in my career that gave me an opportunity and gave me an exhibition. Not at that time, she was not at the George Eastman House. She was at the Southeast Museum of Photography in Daytona Beach, Florida. So, but she supported me and it made a big difference. And so I brought her, but we were talking about, the photograph as an object. The image is an object. The object of the image. And it's something that I'm very intrigued by it, by learning, by the conversation that I can have with a photograph, with an image. And you mentioned forensics, crime scenes sometimes are figured out by, you always have a photographer documenting the crime scene. Why? Because those remnants, those things that are left behind will tell you a story if you pay attention to it. We use the medium of photography to document that so we can continue looking at it and we can learn things. We can learn the direction of, and I mean, it's terrible to say it because it's crime scenes, but you can learn. You can learn things. They talk to you. Those things, that evidence talks to you about how things were done, how things happen. That's why in many ways I love archaeology, because of this sense of an object has the ability to tell you things, even though we don't live in the era where they come from. We just have to pay attention to them. It's a puzzle that you put together. And once you put them together, they tell you something. And that's the way that I look at the medium of photography, that it has the ability to tell me something.
I think the answer to my next question, Maria, is multifaceted from what you've said, but I'm going to ask you where you do feel the most satisfaction in the work that you do now.
The most satisfaction. I know that when I am not here, my work will be here. This is my legacy. And the satisfaction probably in doing my work, I do it because I have an immense need to express myself. I don't do it for the public. I don't work when I have a show. I'm always working, and again, because I'm working because of questions. If my work, if I have the possibility of an exhibition, if I have in a gallery or a museum and the public can see it, I love it. But if it doesn't happen, I was working as hard as I'm working today when I was young. I'm working as hard today as when I was younger. Now that I'm less younger, I work as hard as I was working when you're young and you have this energy and you have this devotion, you want to get to be known. You want your work to go somewhere. I don't look at it that way. It was never really that drove me to, or that was not what drove me to do my work. What drove me to do my work was that I wanted to express myself. Sometimes I have nightmares. When I have a nightmare, like, a dream, a nightmare, one of the nightmares is, that I cannot breathe. I cannot talk. My voice is not coming out. My mouth is making this noise, but my voice doesn't come out. I don't hear it. And I relate that to the idea that if I cannot express myself, I lose something, so I want to make sure that when the time comes and I cannot talk anymore because I am not going to be here, that my work will be left behind. And that is where, satisfaction will be. Anybody that wants to look at my work, I'm all for it. Because, if I get a phone call and somebody say, I'm interested in coming to your studio, will you allow me to do that? I say, yeah. Very rare do I ever say no. Because it's You never know when a conversation with somebody, and it doesn't have to be an art person. It could be anyone. Sometimes I have the most incredible conversations with people that have nothing to do with the art world. Because they are very honest in the way that they look at the work and the things that they see. And sometimes those conversations open my eyes to bodies of work that I absolutely can change, the way that I look at my own work.
In 2022, you had an exhibition, Absence Revealed, which was a very personal journey for you as well, with the work that you showed there. And you said in your statement that by experimenting with different and unconventional processes, you reflect on the closely related subjects of archive and memory, and this often results in an examination of both the human need for conclusive stories and the questions whether anecdotes fictionalize history. And these new works are not meant to show the complete picture. They're stories and objects that are hidden. This I find is interesting. This says so much about you, and that they're the results of your own interpretation without being hindered by historic reality, and by examining the ambiguity and origination via retakes and variations. And you try to increase the dynamic between the viewer and yourself by objectifying emotions and investigating the duality that develops through different interpretations. Mm-hmm. That's a very complex statement in of itself, Maria, but it speaks to the person that you are, that there are many layers to you as an artist.
Yes. And I mean, that exhibition, the exhibition came from an award that I got in October of 2020. And then 2 months later, I was on a super high after I received that award, which is the Michael Richard Award from Ulight's Art here in Miami. It was an extraordinary moment for me in October of 2020. And then 2 months later, suddenly my mother passed away on December 28th of 2020. And, it was, I went from a super high to a super low. I couldn't do my work. I had to take a break from my work because I couldn't deal with that aspect of loss, of someone so dear to me. And that it was suddenly that, we weren't expecting it. It was just happened, from one day to the other. It was, and I never experienced the loss of a parent. It was, my father's still alive. And so, it really pushes you to confront yourself with this horrible pain that you're feeling. But, I knew that I was going to have a show coming up at the Bass Museum in Miami, Florida. And, I thought I had to find a way to eventually go back to do my work. And I took about 5 months. Mom passed away in December 2020. And then in May of 2021, the director of the museum with the curator of the exhibition come to my studio to talk about, the show and what the dates of the show and what they were, in what gallery they were going to give it to me and all of that. And I think 2 days after they leave, I decided to I had already planned to tear down a wall and connect 2 rooms in my home and the master bedroom with another room that I had in the house. And the handyman was here and, he was upstairs. I live in a 2-story home. And the first time that he hammered that wall to bring it down, I suddenly realized that I'm looking at a flower. Something is behind the plaster of the wall. So I stop. I tell, him, stop, there's something in there. Let's use our hands to bring down the plaster. And then suddenly I realized that the original wallpaper of my home from 1924 is there. Mm-hmm. Suddenly it made sense because my mother loved flowers and she had orchids in the backyard of our home. I grew up with her garden and suddenly this happened. And I thought, You've been thinking about you've been feeling this sense of loss. You've been feeling this, and which is the place that I feel the safest. It's my home. This is when COVID hit. This is where I was, in my home, where I have my studio. And whenever I am going through a difficult time, this is where I come. This is the place that I am in. And so it's where I feel the safest, and where I am able to deal with the pain that I was feeling. So suddenly I asked him, the handyman, to tore the plaster really carefully so I would bring the wallpaper down, bring it to my studio. And it is here suddenly, after 3 days of bringing down the wall, I have the tables in my studio completely covered with the wallpaper. And it made sense to me that I was use that language, of that organic language of the flower and the garden, as a way to also deal with the loss of my mother and deal with the present. And as you mentioned, the sense of layering. Not everything is shown. There are things that were hidden. I also used material that she brought out of Cuba in 1960 that I did not know that she had all this material. I knew she had some, but I didn't know how much she had. And when we were cleaning her apartment, start getting ready to put it on the market, it was around the time that I was, that I found the wallpaper. So everything happened at the same time. And, as an artist, you have to be open to, I pay a lot of attention to signs and the things that are happening, things happening at the right moment. I can be interested in an idea, and I might wait. That idea may come back to me 2 years later, because maybe when the idea came in my head, I was not ready for the idea. And that's what happened with that work, with that wallpaper. It was amazing to me that I realized that I was having this pain, and that this body of work was going to help me move on and to deal with the loss of my mother and come to terms. And, she would have been absolutely super happy that I ended up using the things that belong to her as part of the works in the show. They were, and again, when the title of the show, when Leilani Lynch, who was a curator of the exhibition, she asked me, Maria, we need to have a title for the exhibition. And I'm still working on the work, and I normally get a title after I finish the work. But I started thinking, it's about absence, but it's also about revealing, because sometimes I put the wallpaper on top of a photograph and then I peel it off or I sand it, and I started uncovering what was hidden before. And it makes sense to me that this was absence that was revealed through layering, through the process of layering and the process of collage also on the work, which I love.
And it's all those collages that you produce which make your work so fascinating, and how you source the materials too, that you reimagine as you go. I'm wondering then, for someone who's maybe new to your art, Maria, if it's necessary to be able to appreciate it, is to at least understand something of the process.
Yes and no. I think that visually, I think that when you look at a work of art, be a sculpture, be a painting, be a photograph, whatever it is, you as a person, when you're looking at a work of art, you're bringing yourself, who you are, what we call the baggage. You bring your iconography, you bring your identity, you bring your experiences as a person, and you are with your eyes, you're looking at an artwork, but with your head and with your heart, two very different things, the brain and the heart, two very different, but when they are communicating with each other, it's a very interesting dialogue, you know? And as a person, you're looking at something. You don't have to know about art. You just have to relate to it, and relate to it maybe with your own life, you know, with your own way of being. And do you need to know the process? Would it help if the people or the public knows the process? I don't think it's necessary, but what I have found as an artist is that the public is very interested in knowing the process that we artists utilize to the process of creation, the process of art making. They're always very interested in what an artist have to say. And the public, be knowledgeable or not, can tell I think that when you are honest and when you are verbal on your own work, it's very good to be able to do that. Because even hearing yourself talking about your own work sometimes even help you as an artist. And that's why I love to give lectures, and I love to be an artist, because having a conversation with my students can open up my eyes to my own work. And I love that. You know, do they have to know? No. Would it help? I mean, once in a while, or do I get bothered if people ask me how you did this? No, not at all. You know, I think it's an educational process. I love education, and I love knowledge. So, you know, sometimes when I have people that are doing something in the house, like I tell my handyman, I'm not checking on you because I'm standing next to him looking at what he's doing. And I say, I'm not checking at you, you know, checking what you're doing and how you're doing things. I'm standing next to you because I love to be looking at other people's working, you know. So it's about that curiosity, the curiosity of knowledge and learning. And so I don't mind it if people ask me. I'm not doing, and I'm going to tell you, I'm not doing anything that had been invented by me. These are not processes that I created. These are processes that have been out there. Some of them I'm using them because they're not used in the medium of photography, but I use them to make a photograph. So sometimes when I need art materials, I don't go to an art supply store. I go to Home Depot. I go to a hardware store, because I look for ways what can I use to make the visual language that I want to work with. So my ideas and my voice can be as clear as it can be.
Adding your ideas, your voice to the conception. And you did share with me last week, Maria, the work that you're working on now. Are you able to share anything of that with us?
Well, I'm not going to share a lot because it's still work in progress, and normally I don't, wait for it later because it's not finalized. But I am looking at the work of August Sander, who is one of the great portrait photographers of the 20th century. Did an extraordinary body of work. Very well known, very important, sometimes difficult portraits, because some portraits are people of the 20th century. Some of those people are Nazis, they're Germans, they are prisoners, they're persecuted and persecutors. So the historical aspect is important. But I'm looking at the work in regards to portraiture. And so, right now, if you ask me exactly why are you doing and you're working with this, do I know? No. Do I feel that I have to do it, yes. And I follow my instinct. You know, I learned to trust myself and to trust my instincts. If it ended up becoming a body of work that I'm able to show in a gallery or a museum or exhibition, great. Sometimes I make bodies of work that nobody has ever seen yet. So I don't know where it's going to take me, but yes, it's a body of work. It's a photographic body of work based on photographs, and primarily also on a book, because it's a book on Sanders' work, Faces of Our Time, that I've been looking at as inspiration for new works, but it's not finalized yet. And you know, I'm not very modern or contemporary in the sense that I don't post anything on social media until it is done, until it's finished, because I don't show work in progress. I am very careful not to do that. I think that could be dangerous to do as a contemporary artist. I like to show the work when it's already done.
Do you keep a notebook of your aspirations and goals and other things that you want to try in this lifetime, Maria?
No. I don't. I mean, do I have I have a notebook, or what I call a darkroom log or a studio log. I have that. I used to have journals. I don't keep journals anymore. I am always writing things down. If I come upon a sentence that somebody said, I write it and that I'm interested in. Like when I brought Allison to work with my students, I'm sitting in the back, just listening to them. Sometimes something was mentioned. I may write it down because I related to what was said. But if I write something of things that I want to do and things like that, no, I don't. I don't know if that's why you asked me completely. So I hope I understood the question correctly.
So you keep your ideas logged, I'm sure. Yeah, I just wondered if you had any long-term goals that, you know, the things are what we call our bucket list these days.
Oh my God. My bucket list is, let's see. There are things that I would love to do. There are things that I haven't done yet. There are things that I haven't been able to accomplish yet. I am looking forward to my retirement as a teacher. I know that I will not retire as an artist. I will continue doing that. But it would allow me, you know, there are places that I would love to visit that I haven't visited yet. Like I would love to go to Japan. And I haven't done that yet. I always wanted to go to Egypt. That has never happened, yet. But primarily I want to leave a peace with myself and a peace, you know, I want to have I'm a loner when I do my work. I like to be on my own. I don't like to be with talking to people or hearing voices or any of that. No, I put music when I work. But I need to concentrate and focus in what I am doing. When I work on my work, I am absolutely out of social media. I do not, because that can be very addictive. You know, so when I'm concentrating on my work, I just do my work. I'm very little in social media. I don't post any work in progress. I just need to concentrate on the work. But yeah, I have a lot of things that I still would love to do. Absolutely. That I, you know, yeah, many things that I would love to do.
So much already accomplished and so much more to come, Maria. And thank you so much for taking the time to be my guest. It's been an absolute pleasure.
No, thank you, Chris. Thank you for having me over. I really, really appreciate it. So thank you so much.
You'll find a link in the show notes accompanying this episode to Maria's social media and to ours. You can follow us on Instagram, where you can leave your comments, questions, or suggestions for guests. We'd love to hear who you would like to hear from. That's the AART Podcast, Art with 2 A's, on Instagram. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, we'd love it if you could leave us a review and a 5-star rating, because that improves our rankings on Apple Podcasts, which helps others find the show. I'll be back next week when my guest will be landscape artist Erin Spencer. So I hope you'll join me then.